Good evening, all. Peter? Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So thank you to everyone for joining. It's about 6:05. We're going to give it a few more minutes before we start. You can sit back, relax, grab a drink of water or coffee if you need, or maybe an iced tea because it's so hot outside. And we'll be on in a few minutes. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. So welcome again, everyone. We will begin shortly. Please introduce yourself in the chat. As we said a few moments ago, grab a drink and grab a pen and paper and center yourself for the event tonight. Thank you, Ali. So it's about 6:08. Let's get started. And if other folks join us as we go along, that will be great. So we're going to do a check-in questionnaire questions. We're asking you to put in your name, what community do you represent, and what are your expectations from tonight's workshop in the chat for us. Welcome, Jose. Thank you for joining us. Amazing. Are you in Puerto Rico right now? You can let me know in the chat, or if you're living here in Toronto. Welcome, Pedro. Thank you for joining us. It's great to see UTM being represented in the chat. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for putting comments in the chat. Waleed, can we have the next screen, please? Just to let you know, this event will be recorded and live streamed on our YouTube channel and translated. And this event is brought to you by Neighborhood Pods TO. My name is Charlene. I'm one of the members of the team at Neighborhood Pods TO, and we're so happy to have everyone here tonight for our workshop on dismantling white supremacy in education, the youth version. Next screen, please, Waleed. I'm going to pass off to Reagan to do our land acknowledgement. Go ahead, Reagan.
Thank you. Thanks, Charlene, and thank you everyone for coming. So first, I would like to acknowledge the privilege that we hold being here today because we are settlers on this land, and as a result, we have a responsibility to actively engage in decolonization. And one very preliminary step in that process is acknowledging the land that we're on. So we're all in various locations here today on this Zoom. I'm not so sure where you're calling from, but we seem to all be centered around Toronto, which is built on the traditional lands of the Mississauga, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, the Huron, and many other Indigenous peoples. So I encourage all of you to visit native-land.ca, where you can actually learn about what land you're currently on. And in addition, I would like to acknowledge that Canada was founded as a trade and commerce economy that continues to affect the lives and well-being of Indigenous people, putting economic greed in front of Indigenous rights. And speaking of our responsibility to engage in acts of decolonization, some of you might be familiar with the image we had up initially of the statue. So X University was previously named after a colonist who helped shape the residential school system that drained Indigenous communities of their languages, their culture, and above all, their children. And because we're going to be talking about white supremacy in the education system today, as we do, I implore you all to keep in mind the way that the education system looked and continues to look for Indigenous youth. And finally, I would like to acknowledge that many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island live in Toronto. I would like to value their diversity of cultural worldviews, their resiliency, and their ties to their communities. We also recognize that many folks in Toronto are newcomers, including those who are brought here against their will through the transatlantic slave trade and other forms of imperialism. And that being said, I'd like to pass it on to Khalil.
Awesome. Thank you for doing that wonderful land acknowledgement, Reagan. So today's agenda. So the first thing is we're going to do a Zoom overview. We're going to look at our meeting's objectives. We're going to go through our community agreement to make sure we're all on the same page. We did check-in questions so we can get to know each other a little bit more. This is a youth workshop around dismantling white supremacy in education. So we're going to have some great, dialogues around that. If you have questions, please let us know. Also, we are going to turn the mic to you all so you can also share some of your thoughts and be able to contribute to the conversation. And then also we're going to discuss the actions and next steps. What does that look like for the future? Yes, we talked about it. Yes, we shared. Yes, we discussed. But what does the next steps? What actions can we take to implement some of the things that we learned today? Next slide. So we're going to go through a quick Zoom overview. So the first thing is, please, everyone, mute your mic unless you want to share. But we encourage you to also utilize the group chat. So that is the feature on the bottom of your screen on the left-hand side. So you just click mute and unmute when you're ready to share or you want to, say something, but keep it muted for the most part. Also, if you want to put on a video, we would love to see all the amazing, beautiful faces that are here tonight. You can click the start video function, which is on the bottom of your screen. We totally understand that sometimes your space doesn't give you the ability to kind of, show your face or show what's going on in the background. So you can definitely, have your cameras off if it's suitable for you. Also, if we look at the chat function, you can click on that if you wanted to, communicate, share, add anything that comes to mind. You can also do that. So you just click on chat in the bottom of the screen, and then you'll be able to type, what you would like. We also have the live transcript. So if you want to, if you're a visual person, you want to see, what we're actually saying, you can click live transcript and you'll see those words populate on the screen. And also we have the reaction button. So if you wanted to put like a thumbs up or you want to put like a celebration, you just want to be more interactive in the conversation, we also have those emojis and reaction features. There also, all you have to do is click on reactions. And once again, tonight's conversation is going to be recorded. So just wanted to let you know. So I'm going to pass it off to Glows, I believe, who's going to go over today's workshop.
Okay, hello everyone. So for today's workshop, the purpose is to learn from our community education advocates and students and have the opportunity to discuss the educational reforms and transform education. So the outcomes is just to build awareness for settler colonialism and white supremacy in education, share lived experiences, gather various perspectives on how to unlearn the system practice of hate, allyship with white people, including policymakers, community organizations, and people of color, concrete action plans to reform education, increase solidarity and offer support, and a working group to dismantle white supremacy in education. And so let's do the community agreement. So this space is dedicated to create an equitable, diverse, and inclusive environment for all the members of the neighborhood. Our meetings will intentionally build accessible and welcoming spaces for people of all races, genders, classes, abilities, ages, cultures, religion, and sexualities. We will not tolerate harassment of any form, including but not limited to racism, classism, sexism, ableism, homophobia, transphobia, and any other oppressive language and behavior. If you witness or experience harassment, please inform a member of the organizing team, marked by a star in the participants.
Awesome. So I'm going to take it over here. Thank you so much, Glows. So we're going to do a quick icebreaker just to kind of spice up and change the dynamic of the space. So the activity is called This or That. And how it works is I'm going to give you two options, and in the chat a feature below, you're going to write which one you prefer. Any questions before we start and get into the icebreaker? Type a 1 in the chat if you're ready to go, ready to start. Okay, perfect. Awesome. So the first one is, do you prefer watching TV shows, or watching movies. So you're probably chilling out, watching on Netflix, right? And you're like, okay, what do I watch today? Do I watch movies, right? Like a 1-2 hour movie, or do I binge watch TV shows back to back to back? So let me check the chat to see what people are saying. So beautiful TV shows, movies, TV shows, TV shows, TV shows, TV shows. Awesome. So I think the TV shows definitely one that we have some binge watchers in the chat today. Awesome. So the next one, when it comes to weather, some people say it's just too hot. I know the weather's getting nice. And some people is like, they complain that it's too cold. So what is it? Do you prefer summertime, or do you prefer the winter, the hot or the cold? So we have people yelling in the chat, summer, 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 winter, winter, summer, all the way, summer, 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 100%. I don't look good in hats. All right. Yeah, honestly, I think summer won that. Next one. So you're going out, maybe you want to have a birthday party, or maybe you want to go on vacation, travel to a nice country. Which do you prefer, to go into a hotel, or do you prefer Airbnb? Talk to me. Okay, we have hotel, Airbnb. Okay, we have hotel. Ooh, interesting. Okay, hotel, Airbnb. But I honestly think the Airbnb. Maybe we can have one person type in the chat why you choose Airbnb, or maybe why you chose like the hotel. Like, what is your reason for choosing one or the other? Feels more like home with the Airbnb. Facts. I think so too. Gives you that home vibe. Anyone wants to advocate for the hotel a little bit? Hotel's 5-star, then it's it's bougie. I feel you. I feel you. All right, next one. So this is for all my music lovers in the house. Do you prefer Spotify or Apple Music? So type in the chat, Spotify or Apple Music. Wow, everyone's on the Spotify. Okay, Waleed say Apple Music. Waleed, I don't know about all of that still. All right. Someone put Deezer. Listen, that's not even an option right now, okay? It's Spotify or Apple Music. It's a Spotify flex still. Okay, awesome. I have Spotify on my phone, honestly, so, it's a game changer. Next one, do you prefer to be solo dolo or in a group? Like, maybe, do you like your alone time chilling, or are you a sociable person, you like to be with people? Okay, we have some solo, group, alone, a group, with people, alone, both. But I love alone. I know those ones. I love people, but I love my alone time. Like, I'm in between. So it's a hard one still, right? And then goes like alone with a bit of group of people. I feel you. I think it just depends on the vibe or the mood, right? Okay, so we have here as a brand, we know there's some big giants in the clothing industry, and designers that we like to wear. So is it Nike or Michael Jordan the GOAT? Which one y'all choose? I think Nike owns Jordan anyway, so and they're like one and the same. Okay, so we have some Jordans. Oh, never had Jordans or Nike. Wow. Okay, interesting. Cannot pick. I love both. Charlene. We have some Jordans. Okay, don't come for me, but Nike. Jordans. I think it's a Jordan flex. Like the first pair of Jordans I had on, like I fell in love with it, to be honest, right? So, but Nike's still hard. Nike's still nice. All right, next one. So this is the challenge of the foods, right? Is it African food or is it Caribbean food? Which one takes it? Where's my people at? Where are my people at? Caribbean or African food? Honestly, they're both flavorful. They're both tasty stuff. But I'm Caribbean, so I'm a little biased. I'm a little biased because I'm Caribbean. So, all right, we have here Wally said African, Glow said both, Bearland said Caribbean, Alistair is like African, specifically Ghanaian. He's like, yo, I don't care. I have to shout it out. Ghanaian, not Nigerian, not Uganda, not Kenyan, Ghanaian. I'm out here. Okay. I like that. All right. Social media apps, Instagram or TikTok? If you could only choose one, for entertainment, learning, whatever the case, you use social media, running your business, do you prefer Instagram or TikTok? Okay, we have TikTok, Instagram, TikTok, Instagram. Some people are like, yo, I can't even keep up. Like, there's always so much, social media apps. Okay, I don't have TikTok, trying to preserve my brain for sure. That social media detox is so needed, right? I've been doing that. So IG. Okay, it's like an in-between. I feel like it's an in-between. All right, so we have a few more before we wrap up and move into our next segment. So we have a successful career or a successful business. Which do you prefer? Your dream career or your dream business? You only had to choose one, right? Really want to see what people have to say about that one. Okay, so we have career, we have business. We have someone who yells out both, which is disqualified, Charlene. We have career, we have successful business, we have career. Wow, I don't know. I think career won that one, but I felt like it was in between. All right, so your dream career, dream business, that's dope. It's great to see, some people are half on half. I thought some people might say business. All right, cool. So next one. This is for the older generation and the younger generation. Do you prefer text or call? Like, do you rather talk to a person and like, yo, I have to call you because I want to get everything out? Or is it like text? Like, yo, honestly, don't call me right now. Just, I'm doing things. I'm too busy. Just text me. All right, let's see what people are saying. So you have text, call, text. I miss all my calls, text. Honestly, I think we're in the generation of text. So calling, unless we close like that, then I think we have to, do the text thing. Last one. This one's powerful. Do you prefer true love or $10 million? They say money can buy love, right? So I don't know if it's true, but do you prefer true love, like having that unconditional love, whether by friend, your family, your partner, or do you prefer $10 million? Which is more important, money or relationship? People are saying $10 million, easiest decision I ever made. 10 million. True love should feel like having $10 million. Yeah, Charlene's old school. That's what's up. 10 million. Berlin said true love. Nadine said true love. Alistair said 10 million any day. True love who gives me 10 million. Only if it could work like that. 1 million is good. Okay. Being humble over here. And true love. Okay, awesome. So it seems like both. Seems like both with that one, both won it. All right, awesome. So thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of that amazing icebreaker. I really got to know you all a little bit more to see your perspectives and what y'all like. So yeah, so I'll pass it off to the next person so we can change the next slide. Okay, perfect. So the next person is me. So Khalil to Khalil. So we're going to go through a quick community agreement. So the first thing we ask you is mute your mic, right? That's a big thing, but I think we're doing a phenomenal job at doing that, just based on how quiet everything is. But, hopefully that changes a little bit with the conversations and discussions. Put your questions in the chat. If you can't answer in between the presentation, guess what? We're going to answer your question at the end, right? I believe we're gonna have some time to do that. So don't feel like you're unheard or we didn't see you. Just post in the chat. We have some moderating, and they'll definitely save that for you later. Have an open mind, right? I feel like, being open-minded about certain things, right, is gonna help you learn more. We're gonna talk about, tough and challenging conversations and just the reality of things, like dismantling, white supremacy is a real thing that's happening, and it affects, anyone who comes from the BIPOC community. So I think being open-minded to this and saying, hey, how can I be the change that I want to see, or be an advocate, or, help and collaborate and be involved, like having that mindset is really going to help you in the long run. Also respect each other. I believe in order to get respect, you have to give it. So if there's anything that people say, just, embrace it, right? You don't have to agree, but, just, let them speak. I think everyone has a voice. Also letting you know that this is a safe and brave space. So, anything that's shared today, let's just keep it here. Like, let's have these conversations here, especially if it's personal. And also, if there's something that is personal that you don't want to share, listen, you are not forced to share it. Please keep it to yourself. Also letting you know that people are going to be vulnerable. We're going to be sharing some of the stuff. So this is a safe space. We are all family. I like to look at each other as brothers and sisters. Also, we encourage you to speak up. There's not going to be any judgments here, I promise you. And if it does happen, we are going to address it. So no judgments, no stereotypes. We're not having no prejudice lens here. This is a brave space where you are encouraged to speak up and talk what's on your mind. And also just be your true authentic self, because original is better than a copy. Take lots of notes, like we said. So have a paper pen handy. Also have your tablet, whatever device you use, take notes, because this is information that we're actually going to take with us and, figure out how we can put some strategies in place, get funding together to actually, create programs and curriculums around this. And then also have fun, have a good time. This is for us. This is for us by us. The most important thing in any workshop is that you're having a good time, but you're also learning, while you're doing it. So that's our community agreement. Okay, perfect. So the next person that I am going to introduce, he is literally a GOAT when it comes to, and when I say GOAT, the greatest of all time when it comes to doing a lot of amazing community work. He's really for the people. He shows the community that he cares. He puts countless hours into this work, and he just have a servant heart, and he's a servant leadership in his community. So I would like to introduce Walid Kogali Ali. He's a community builder, right? He's a community builder. He's all about affordable transit, environmental stewardship, equity, and human rights. He's a big advocate for work with residents to create a safe, inclusive, sustainable communities free from discrimination. And also he's the co-founder of the Coalition Against White Supremacy and Islamophobia, CAWSI. So I introduce to you Walid. Take it over from here.
Thank you so much, Khalil. What an amazing introduction. And I just want to thank all the folks that have joined us at this workshop, but were also at our community conversation last week when we had an amazing panel of Indigenous and Black women who shared their wisdom, shared gems, in my opinion, so much knowledge about how to unpack, identify the impact of white supremacy, but most importantly, how can we work together as allies, as collaborators, as co-conspirators in this very important work. And today we're going to make sure that we focus our workshop on the voices of youth, many who are deeply impacted by white supremacy in the education system. We're going to have a great conversation today with some amazing youth panelists that I'm going to introduce next. And I want folks to, note if they have questions of your own that you want to raise later on today, because we want to also address your questions and have a conversation that's going to be focused on how could the vision of youth for much more equitable system that is not founded in white supremacy, how could that be created? And how could we work collaboratively in making that a reality? So I just want to welcome all of you to this amazing workshop. And I'm going to get started quickly with some introductions. Before I get into the introductions, I want you to think about why you're here today at this workshop, what you want to take away from it, and put that in the chat. Please put that information in the chat, because we want to ensure that your questions are addressed, but also your needs when it pertains to this workshop. So I'm going to get started with introductions. And before I get into introductions, I just want to thank our amazing partners. So the Toronto Education Workers, Local 4400, as well as the Canadian Federation of Students of Ontario, which represents hundreds of thousands of students. across the province of Ontario. This will not be possible without your support. So thank you from the organizers. So we'll get started with our facilitators. So our first facilitator is Khalil, and thank you, Khalil, for that amazing introduction. Khalil Dorivar is a mindset and wellness coach, self-published author, youth mentor, facilitator, and visible hero awarded by Toronto Police Services and Child Care Services. He's a founder of Khalil Dorivar Enterprises, an organization dedicated to addressing the social and economic barriers that youth encounter through mental wellness workshops. His phenomenal drive and determination has pushed him to become an influential leader in his community, having grown up in an at-risk neighborhood with divorced parents. It wasn't a surprise when Khalil got into trouble with the law, hung out with the wrong friends, had scholastic troubles, and struggled with financial obstacles. In the midst of his shortcomings and mistakes, he challenged himself to grow spiritually, mentally, physically, resulting in a successful turnaround of his life. His major goal is to inspire people to love themselves and in return love others. Known for his enthusiastic energy, and I can attest to that, Khalil is able to translate the trials and tribulations of life into relevant principles and coaching opportunities. His biggest impact globally, giving back to people what God and many mentors have invested in him. On his journey to success and personal well-being, his soul is to change lives, sowing seeds of hope and teachings to bring out the best in people. Welcome, Brother Khalil Dorival. Thank you so much. Our next facilitator is Glaus. Glaus is from Toronto, Ontario. Glaus is dedicated short story writer for 20 years and has written poetry for 10 years. She's an author of 2 self-published books, a Kintsugi memoir and Hood Chronicles. Her writing reflects on her personal experience and the lives of people surrounding her. Also passionate about building relationships with different communities. She has been an active member in community engagements across the GTA since 2010. Glaus had recently become a reporter for the Toronto Caribbean News as of 2021 and has her poetry been showcased in newspapers from 2020 and ongoing. So welcome, Glaus, to our amazing discussion today. Next is Mitra Yakubi, who's also the chairperson for the Canadian Federation of Students, Ontario. Mitra Yakubi is one of the at-large representatives working alongside the staff of the Federation to implement campaigns, services, and support for member locals. As a chairperson, Mitra is also the principal spokesperson of the Federation. Prior to her role as the chairperson, Mitra served one term as the Women's Constituency Commissioner at the Federation and 2 terms as the president of Local 109, UTMSU, the University of Toronto Mississauga Students Union, a local that I love as well. And Mitra is currently pursuing a master's in global affairs and public policy at the University of Toronto, hoping to specialize in education and public health policy. Welcome, Mitra. Next, we have Reagan. Reagan Rupnaran is a 4th-year undergraduate student at the University of Toronto Mississauga, studying political science, environmental policy, and professional writing. In the 2 years she has worked at the University Students Union, the UTMSU, Reagan has had the privilege of co-organizing various grassroots initiatives, including All Out September 30th, a national-wide virtual protest against Black and Indigenous racism in the education system, as well as the creation of UTM Seed Library, an initiative to tackle food insecurity on campus. Reagan was recently elected as the new Vice President of Equity at the University of Toronto Mississauga Students Union. In her new role, she's excited to build on anti-racism work, sustainability initiatives, and continue the fight for free and accessible post-secondary education for all. Welcome, Reagan. So the 4 questions that we're going to be delving into is, what role does representation or lack of play in academia, and how can we go beyond tokenism, which will be addressed by Mitra, facilitated actually by Mitra. And then second question is, what do you think are the long-term effects of the school to prison pipeline, which Glaus is going to facilitate. We're going to go through the third question, which is nutrition, mental health, and overall health and well-being has an impact on access to education. So what can we do to eliminate discrimination in the healthcare system to better support youth, which Khalil is going to facilitate. The last question is, how can we make post-secondary education more welcoming and accessible to to BIPOC students, Black, Indigenous, and other students of color. So Reagan is going to also address that. So I'm going to ask one of my friends to go through the statistics. So who would like to speak to the statistics?
Thank you, Lead. So we wanted to first start off by grounding our conversation in some context and really explaining why we're having this event today. So some stats you may not know is that 42% of Black high school students were suspended in Toronto. That's pretty staggering. That's about 1 in 2. And Indigenous youth make up 40% of the foster care system, far less of the population, so disproportionate in that regard. And last, the final residential school closed in 1996, so in most of our lifetimes. And the reason why we're sharing these stats with you is so that you can sort of have a framework for moving forward to our questions. And the findings suggest that Black students often face mistrust and low expectations in high school, which we know that there's a lot of anecdotal evidence for that. And as a result, they're disproportionately suspended, expelled, put into courses that are below the level of academic, and so kind of pushed into a college or trades pathway, which is great, but should be one's choice and not something that you're pressured into. I think we can move on to the next slide.
Okay, just before we move on to the slide, I'm just going to quickly share a video just to contextualize how recent this event happened. So give me 1 second. Can you folks hear the audio? Let me know if you can hear the audio. Just give me 1 second.
It's not playing now. Some parts.
Okay, but now it's playing?
It's playing, but I don't know if
You
you
need
want
to
to play it
optimize
louder.
the sound. You have to optimize the sound on Zoom.
Okay. So I'm just going to stop sharing this. Give me 1 second. And I'm going to share the video directly. I think that's going to be way better. Give me 1 second. Skip this, okay, and okay. Share screen.
Black racism within our school system can be measured in a number of ways. But one of the most troubling examples is what's referred to as the school-to-prison pipeline. That is when Black youth face more discipline and harsher penalties in schools than white students. As a result, it puts them in direct contact with law enforcement and potentially sends them down the wrong path and through the justice system. There's a lot to unpack here. So City News reporter Mark McAllister joins us live now. It is a troubling reality, Mark, and you are also looking at a new initiative aimed to help with the reform. Good morning.
Good morning, Mel. Yes, well, when we look at the situations involving young people that are in trouble as they make their way through the school system, it's handled in different ways. Look at specific examples. Sometimes they'll just be sent to the office. Other times it ends up in some sort of discipline where they end up going home from school for a day or two. It's all in how it's handled, though, in those situations, and some situations are different from others, and that's what we're looking at now. Does it end up in their parents having to talk to them, their teachers mentoring them, or does it involve police at some point? And so that's what this organization is looking at specifically. I want to introduce introduce you to a man who admittedly had problems when he was in school, but there was one particular situation where he had some issues. He ended up in a confrontation with a teacher. Some words were said, and this is what happened.
There was a conflict that we had, and as a result of that, I got expelled, you know? And the way that I found out I was expelled, it's like police came to my door and said that I wouldn't be allowed back on school property, and if I did, I'd be charged for trespassing. But at the time, I didn't know I was expelled. I was only suspended, you know? So that like scared me and my mom, right? And we're like, why wouldn't we hear this from the school first?
One small example, now that's Marley Lawrence. He's now 21 years old, and I can say that he has since been involved in a number of programs as a youth mentor, and he's helping those young kids try and figure out what may be the case when they're in trouble as well.
Mark, just looking at the stats alone that you've provided to us here, 42% of black students have been suspended at least once in high school, and that's compared to 18% of white students. Just looking at the numbers alone, outside of what you're hearing and talking to members of the community, that is disturbing. So how do we change this all?
Well, there's a number of ways, and I should throw another stat at you as well. When those black students get into those situations, end up being streamlined into certain courses and certain classes, 53% end up taking academic classes compared to 80% of white students. And that's why there's an organization, the Black Legal Action Center, that's taking on an initiative over the next year and a half or so. And what they're going to be doing throughout entire province is reaching out to black communities, families, but also to legal areas, also the school systems, to try and gather more information and figure out why exactly this is the case and why certain situations are dealt with in certain ways. What they hope to do at the end of all this is put together some sort of resource website for black families to go to try and help navigate their way through the system and get to the bottom of things, but also put together a final report that's going to be making recommendations to the ministry, to the school system, and to the justice system so things can be fixed, hopefully over time as well. And of course,
Okay, I'm just gonna go back to the other slide deck in 1 second.
The anti-black racism.
So the next thing that I want us to center our us to think about what we're centering our conversation is the impact on Black youth, specifically the barriers to economic empowerment. So there is an organization called Youth Rex, and it's done some amazing research, which we are going to share in the chat. But the research speaks to the economic marginalization of youth, specifically Black youth, the disproportionate outcomes in the education system for Black youth, the lack of access to critical social capital, and also discrimination in employment. And I'm just going to quickly again show a really nice video of how communities are coming together to push back against the impact that's been shared through the research findings of various researchers. Give me 1 second.
It was a room full of positive energy today at the TCDSB Girl of Power Conference.
This conference is just a way for us to acknowledge each other and create a way for us Black women to come together to brainstorm ways that we can make a difference in the world and put ourselves out there.
Led by the Power to Girls Foundation, a nonprofit organization that supports and empowers Black and marginalized girls, the conference was attended by more than 200 students in person and hundreds of others online. The girls took part in workshops, keynote addresses, and panel discussions.
To share what the Black experience is, and also to discuss what it's like navigating the education system, society, and and just the world as a whole. Main goal that we want them to walk away here with is that being a Black girl is powerful. They are seen, they are valuable, they are worthy.
And being told those things leads to increases in confidence, self-worth, and drive.
I feel like every young Black girl needs to know that they just have to accept themselves and be happy the way they are. Just letting everyone know that they need to be heard and they should be heard.
And participants were inspired by the energy of just being together.
Black women just supporting each other, the energy in the room just pumping, the melanin and everything just going around is just one step forward.
Well, if you'd like to see some of the amazing talks and seminars that happened here today, you can rewatch them by going to our website, citynews.ca/extras. In Toronto, Audra Brown, City News.
Next, I'd like to pass it on to Regan to speak to being Black on campus. Regan?
Yes, so because we've kind of narrowed our conversation and we're talking about the Black community, it's important to talk about what it's like when you're actually on the ground and on campus. I don't know how many other students are in the call, but I think we can all relate to the pressure of student debt and student loans. And when you're a member of the Black community, that takes a disproportionate effect on you, especially because Black folks make a fraction of the income of their comparable white counterparts. And then we could talk about the lack of diverse faculty and curriculum. So I'm not so sure about all of you, but over the past year, all of my professors have been white men -1. And so what that does is, if you're Black and you're coming from a marginalized community, is it prevents you from reaching out to professors if you need help, accessing support, and feeling like you're connected to course material. And finally, we tend to notice that graduation rates among Black youth are lesser than that of their counterparts. And what's really frustrating about this point is that administration usually points to Black students and they put the onus on Black students and say that it's their fault that they're not graduating at the rates they should be. There's nothing about a Black student that makes them less likely to graduate. There is a lot about their environment and their circumstances and the context that they live in and the oppression that they face that makes them less likely to graduate. And I'll pass it over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Regan. I'm just gonna quickly share a small segment put together by the Fifth Estate on being Black on campus. We're going to try to share that link on the chat as well when we get into questions, but please check it out. It's very powerful. And this actually does happen on our university campuses. So 1 second.
Please. Hi there. Hi, we have a gentleman around 25 to 30 in our lobby, a Black male, who won't give his name or state his business, and he's kind of loitering.
An emergency call in the long hallways of higher learning.
He's ratting out profs and other students.
Not quite what you'd expect to hear.
And he said, "You calm down." So I'm a little leery to go out there by myself.
That's the president's administrative secretary at the University of Windsor.
I don't want to have a confrontation with him because that's what he's at now. All right, we'll have officers come by right away.
And this is the intruder, the Black male mentioned on that call.
My name is Jordan Afolabi. I'm a Nigerian-Canadian student attending the University of Windsor. I'm in my first year of law school.
So those are some experiences, but we also want to share some resources later on. But before we get to that, we're going to get started with the first question. So Mitra, go ahead.
Thank you, Waleed. So for this part of the workshop, what we're going to do is have a series of questions, and we're really hoping to hear from you folks and your perspective on the questions and how we can tackle these on and off our campuses. So the first question is, what role does representation or lack thereof play in academia, and how do we go beyond tokenism? When we were gathering this question, we were really thinking about the experiences on campus when it came to staff, faculty, and students feeling represented or not feeling represented, and how did that impact you specifically? Or do you know of any experiences that you'd like to share in the space? But just to like give you folks a little bit of how I feel about the situation is that I think representation is really important, and the lack of representation to me as a student almost makes me feel like I don't belong in the institution. And I'm very curious to hear your perspectives on this, but I know that, you know, representation matters and it's important because it can also play a role in how I see myself within academia. We know that academia is inherently colonial and oppressive in a lot of different ways, but what does that look like when we're thinking about challenging those systems of oppression that exist within our institution? Does that happen without that representation? And also recognizing that folks that are within our institutions are also overworked and underpaid and undersupported. I think of my time in my institution and university and how I haven't really had a Muslim professor. And it's terrible because I've been in university for 6 years, but I haven't had a Muslim professor yet. So what does that look like for Muslim students that are within our classes? What is the curriculum? What is the classes that are being taught within the institution? What are those experiences that are being shared? I think those are some of the things that I think about as I navigate this conversation, and also thinking about like that one Muslim or racialized person that is within the space. Is that person then overworked? Are they then put into several different committees and community in spaces to be that Muslim person? And what does that emotional labor look like? So I know that was a lot of different aspects for you folks to think about the question, but I'm really curious to hear from you folks what you think the lack of representation it has impact on students. How does it impact students? And how do you go beyond this like tokenism of having certain individuals on our campuses do that emotional labor? And I'll open up the floor. If you're interested in speaking, you can raise your virtual hand or your physical hand, or you can type in the chat and I'll be more than happy to read. All right, Reagan, get us started.
Sure, I'll go first. I love this question. So I think in my experience, it's a lot. It just takes a lot to go up to a white prof and explain your personal situation if you need support. And reason being is there's a lot of little things that people of color go through that you just can't describe to a person. Like they need to have experienced that as well. And so although like profs come in all different shapes, sizes, colors, whatnot, it's really important that when you look at your syllabus, it's not like a sea of white men teaching you things about a diverse world. Because if you need support or you want to feel confident that what you're learning is representative of reality, then you need your syllabus to be diverse like the students who attend those classes. So that's how I feel, and maybe someone else can jump in.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I definitely agree with what you said about the syllabus and like the content that's being taught in classes. But when we think about the experiences, like you said, Reagan, who is teaching those experiences? Because there are some experiences that you can't understand unless you're the one, you know, you're part of the communities that are being impacted, or you know firsthand how it feels like to go through that. So thank you so much for sharing. Is there anyone in the space that wants to share? If not, I totally get it. It's a Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock, so I get it. All right. So maybe we can move on to the second question.
Okay, perfect. We can go on to the second question. And thank you so much, Mitra, for like raising those very important points. And I just want folks to like maybe in the chat, share, did they go to a post-secondary education with diverse faculty members? And one of the things that I'm hoping that we will talk about later on is retention. How many of your diverse faculty members, were there beyond a year or two, right? Was it just a one-off experience, or were you there for 4 years or 5 years, or how long you've been in university or college? Were you able to reconnect with those faculty members? So please share in the chat what your thoughts are, because that's super important. Not at all. I see Philippe saying UFT is mostly white folks in faculty and admin. Okay, that's at the University of Toronto. Saraka says, I think lack of representation can also make you feel unwanted in the space, and that should not be anyone's academic experience, right? So when we talk about social inclusion, how does that look like? Are folks going to classrooms and feeling that they're not, not the exception, right? So that's very important. But TFT so definitely lacking diversity. Okay, and does that relate to lack of diverse courses, right? When we think about lack of diverse faculty, what does that mean? What sort of curriculum gets taught and by whom, right? So very important points. Oh, we see more stuff on the chat. Many educators of color burn out faster than white counterparts. So having one or two is not just enough. So it's how about the emotional labor that comes with being, a faculty of color, and being asked to represent the institution at various spaces, right? And what about supports to ensure that faculty members are better retained? Charlene, go ahead.
So as a mom of elementary school age children, I was involved in a presentation brought to us about teacher retention and how teachers face burnout, but teachers that are of color face burnout way faster than a teacher who is the white counterpart, and just about how the education system lacks recruitment from as early as elementary school or middle school. So my children take French immersion, encouraging the children who take French immersion that they can be a French teacher instead of going out there and working for company A, B, or C, that they can, if that's something that they're interested in, having courses that kind of steer children to that interest of being an educator, so that children of color have that opportunity from a young age to see, hey, I can be that teacher in front of the classroom, even though I didn't have that representation. So that was something that was discussed. I forget the company's name that's doing the research all across Canada for the government. That's something that the government is trying to get involved in and have more students of color know that that's an attainable goal. And so that's something that we could talk about maybe in our actions and next steps about how do we get young folks in high school when they're thinking about careers interested in becoming a teacher, not be only just an elementary school or high school teacher, a professor at a college or university as well. Thank you.
Well said.
I just want to quickly add, great point, Charlene. I think one of the things that we spoke about, I said there's a quote, if they don't see you, they can't be you. And I think the problem is that when young people are looking at teachers that don't look like them, they think it's not attainable. They think it's not for them. Hey, a teacher, professor, someone in that position is not for me. So why would I even strive to actually do that? And I think with the teachers, right, they don't really understand the needs. They come, teach, pick up a paycheck and just leave. They're not really there to really care about the students. And also when you think about the teacher to student ratio, like it's like, how could one teacher teach 30, 40 students? Like, that's not even possible, right? And then the moment you put someone who's a person of color, yeah, amazing tokenism. You have that one golden Black person to say, hey, we are practicing diversity. And then when that person is put in that position, they're feeling oppressed because anytime they try to do something that's outside the box or different, or that's cool or that's working for the young people, they get bashed by all their colleagues. So of course that teacher is going to be burnt out. The teacher is going to feel like, oh, I don't belong. Why am I even trying? Because every idea, every curriculum or thing that I try to push that is going to be relevant and relatable to my students is not going to go through. So I can only imagine. And then also with the diversity with the students, like students to students, I feel like you look around and it's just you, or there's two of you, and it's not encouraging at all. It's not encouraging, because when you see people that are like you or come from communities like you, it motivates you, like, yo, let's keep going, let's keep pushing. This education thing is for us. We belong, we can connect, we can help each other. But when you're there, you're like isolated. You're like, yo, I don't even know how to ask, because Billy, Bob, Jessica, Ashley doesn't, they don't understand what I'm going through. They don't look like me. So it's hard for us to make those connections and develop those relationships. So I think we need to look at, from all parts, when it comes to policies, when it comes to curriculum. We also talked about like music, right? We are music beings, right? Why don't we have music in curriculums? Why don't we have art? I think Charlene was talking about, they had like a paint party, they did a picture of Bob Marley, like introducing some of those things, spoken word, poetry. There's more than one ways of learning. Why do we have this one shoe size fits all approach? We say, hey, we're going to give you a size 9 and we expect everyone to fit in a size 9, when there's multiple different ways of learning styles. There's people who learn through audio, there's people who learn through visual, there's people who learn hands-on. There's different ways of learning. So we need to have an approach where like everyone has different needs, and how can we make sure that we tap into their strengths and their gifts and their abilities, so they can succeed in the educational system. And I think a big thing is also mentorship. If you can have support to say, hey, yes, we have the teacher, but we have like a counselor. We have, a social worker, someone in the background to say, hey, let me mentor you. Let me show you the steps on success. Let me get you from plan A to plan B. How does that look like getting to college? How does that look like in getting to university? What are the different resources, right? Are there scholarships, right? So I don't want to, there's so much ways to look at it. But I just want to end it off there. We need representation. I think it's our goal. It's for us to say, hey, I am going to be that teacher that's going to step into place, and I'm going to disrupt the system, because the system right now is not working for us.
Well said, Khalil. Wow. Well, passionate. I love the way you said you need to disrupt the system because it's failing and not working. And I want to get Shana to go next. But before we get Shana, just want to reflect some comments on the chat. Some awesome comments. As a political science student, Suraka says, I've always wanted to learn more about my country, but I never found any courses that covered it. That's really sad. Joseph says, the only Black teacher I had as a student left teaching years later. Saw her and she remembered me. I asked her what happened. She was asked to go because she was so strict. She's currently my colleague and she's retiring next year. Wow. As a Black teacher, Deborah says, I can concur with this. Thankfully, I finally found supportive school administrators and colleagues, which made the difference. Glo says, thank you for sharing, everyone. So Shana, you want to go next?
Sure. Yes, where do you want me to start?
Go ahead, Shana.
First of all, with the French schools, I am terrified of sending my children to French schools. Although I speak French very well, I've never sent any of my children to French school, simply because my kids have been in, no, my cousins have been in French schools, and the things they've been through, that's what scared me to send my kids to French schools. Like the racism is so real in French schools. If a Black child looks at a white child in a certain way, or hits him for whatever reason, it's like, why did you have to touch that white child? I mean, kids are kids. They fight anywhere they are. They argue. They have their little things. But for like French schools to be saying things like that instead of just solving the problems, I say that's a racist schools. That's why I have fear of sending my children to French school, which is never the reason why I never send them there. When it comes to teachers, my uncle who passed away used to be a teacher, and he used to teach some rich kids. And you want to know what he told me before he passed away, like that, what he ran into, the reason why he quit being a teacher in Canada is because basically white people, when their kids, don't want to learn, they just buy their education for them. It's like, give them an A. I'll give you money to give them an A. But Black kids, they get thrown out of school. Well, where's the justice? Tell me in that. You know what? If you guys are saying racism doesn't exist and you guys are going to try to stop it, I say good luck, because I doubt it will be a perfect world. That I don't know. That would be like a dream come true to me. Like, I don't see that happening. And when it comes to what do you call it? Loans, student loans, I'm in debt. I was, and when it comes to social services, are so racist. I've been through so many racist like workers, back and forth. Reason why I first took my first loan was to get out of, run away from one racist guy and get out of welfare just because of him, and try to, go to school and better myself and see what I can do, because I was told if I learned some computer classes, I could get a job. So I did that. Guess what? That didn't work for me. I ended up in so much debt loans, which I try to pay it off. It's so many times they trick me into paying so much interest, like I'm a rich woman. I'm just a single mother who's on social services.
Mhm.
And instead, I try to give them 6 months of
Mhm.
interest, just interest alone, paying, to see if after that they will let me pay off my loan. No, that didn't work out. They tried that twice. It didn't work out. Instead, I'm still on bad credit.
Thank you for
So,
sharing. Wow, amazing.
there's a lot of issues that
Mhm.
exist and are racist all around us, and we're
Right.
trying our best to
Mhm.
better ourselves,
And that's why we're here.
how we can get out, and it's not
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
why we
and when
started
it
this
comes to
conversation, Shannon.
and
Yeah.
I work at the schools now, like, and I'm trying to better myself, but then again,
Thank you.
I
Yeah.
make say, I think, I don't know, the system is so screwed, because
Yeah.
after you make
And that's why we started conversation,
$25,000,
Shanna.
they can
Yeah.
take off your take your child tax too for taxes. I don't know how that works. Like, it's just messed up all around. I don't know what you guys can do to fix it, but I appreciate if you try to fix something for us.
Thank you, Shauna.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Thank
You're
you for
welcome.
your
Take care.
remarks.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it. So we're gonna go to the second question, and the second question goes. You ready? You have the floor.
Yes, so this is a very heavy loaded question where even one conversation will not be enough, even years of conversations, because of so many layers, because of the history of what incarceration is, and also the white supremacy, and just a lot of layers that it covers so much. But the second question is, what do you think are the long-term effects of the school to prison pipeline? And I would, just start off, like, even like thinking about some of the structure, some of the routines that the schools may have that are similar to, institutions, the federal, provincial institutions. Think about maybe some of the punishments, maybe in school, that could also have a huge impact on individuals. And if you actually compare to a lot of the school and to the prison structures, you will see some similarities. It's as if, like, it's just guiding somebody to actually to normalize what institution, maybe like individuals, maybe the structures. So think about the resource officers that are placed in our schools. Think about even maybe the floor plans, the floor plans from, like, maybe look at similarities of cafeterias or into lunchroom and all that kind of stuff. So there was a video that talked about the school to prison pipeline, how it impacts the Black students, and also the indigenous. The Black and indigenous communities have always been impacted. The prisons are filled with many individuals of the Black and indigenous bloodline. So I want to, like, ask everyone, maybe write in a chat, maybe if you raise your hand, maybe think about what's the impacts in their communities. How about the individual success in life? How does it impact their journey? How does it impact society as an entity? So you can feel free. Definitely, it's a big question. There's a lot of layers that will be unmasked. And once again, even we're having these conversations because there's so many layers. We're continuing to find solutions, and I know even having these conversations could burn up a lot because it feels like there's times it may feel like there is no hope. It's like it's an everlasting battle, but we have to continue to keep pushing. This year, actually for the past like 2 years, there has been a lot of conversations on the injustices that happen in the institutions. It's been shown up more into the media, the conversations, even in universities, colleges. There's a lot of focus groups now. There's a lot of discussions. Now there's actually a lot of teachers, even from elementary, middle school, high school. They're starting to bring up the impacts, especially with the pandemic. It has brought up a lot of stuff that has been going on and how it's trickling down into the educational system, even with the students. Maybe the students are actually feeling distress. Maybe they have loved ones who are incarcerated. Also, even within like the classrooms, with a lot of the restrictions that have been placed on. There's a lot of remarks, there's a lot of comments that talked about the similarities of the school and the prison. And yeah, there's like so much I could talk about, but I do want to like hear everyone and what are their thoughts on it and how it may be impacting. So we're seeing some of the impacts right now as it is seeing like how the city is, how even the world is going on right now. You can think about emotion, mental, physical state, maybe in psychologically as an individual, community, in our household, friends, even strangers, community members. And yeah, feel free to talk about it.
Glose, I could share. I feel like the government, they create oppressive system. And then, we have to utilize those systems. I feel like they create the poison and then they turn around and create a medication. So they build the prison system for a reason. They know because people are oppressed, they're gonna, do certain things that most of society might not agree with. And then so they end up in the prison system, and then, the government look at ways to rehabilitate them or send them back out into society. So, it can be really frustrating. Anybody else want to share?
I see a hand raised up. I don't know if this Sean, is it Sean?
Yeah, they are. Judges and lawyers are benefiting from, putting kids in jail. Why should they give up on that? Police and everybody. I mean, there's good people in everything and there's bad people in everything. And these politicians that are saying they're gonna stop gun and violence and blah, 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 I think all they're doing is just talk. Then they don't want to stop nothing. If they wanted to stop something in a click of a finger, like they should have done it. They're not doing nothing. All they want is to make us think that they're going to stop something. Why should they stop when they're benefiting from it? They're not stopping nothing. So good luck if you guys want to think that they're stopping something. Because I really don't see, like, it's going to be a dream come true to actually see that happen. Because I don't see that happening. I'm just tired of politicians and everybody else just putting our children to school instead of giving them jobs, instead of, making better things for them. Like, all they can do is talk and say they're gonna stop our kids from being in jail, do things better. But how are they doing things better? They need to do things better by making us come out of poverty and making children have jobs. We are so tired of just, being poor and targeted and used. They need to do something for us instead of just talking.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I definitely agree. Oftentimes we it does feel like no one's hearing, and most of the time it's pretty correct. Like these guys are just talking. Because a lot of these guys are talking, and that's why we have these conversations as a community. So we are targeting what's the root causes, so then we can actually provide solutions instead of just waiting on other people who, as you mentioned before, they don't care. They don't care. We can keep pushing into a brick wall, or we can actually go to a different route. Because if we keep knocking on the door that doesn't open, we don't know how many doors will actually open, but we're ignoring them because we're trying to knock at the door that we all know, right? So thank you so much for sharing. I don't know, maybe if there's only one more person about, the long-term effects, because, a school, that is the first place that we go to outside our home pretty much, unless it's if you go into like church, the mosque, etc. outside, but school plays maybe a quarter of our lifetime. If you actually yeah, so.
No, I was saying I saw Reagan has her hand up.
Oh, okay.
Yes. I mean, I was waiting for your pause. I thought you.
Okay.
Go ahead. Thank you. No worries, close.
That's so special now. Thank you. So I think in terms of like the long-term effects of the school to prison pipeline, like we went over this when we were talking about statistics. When you see Black students disproportionately being suspended or expelled, and then you see Black students reaching out for support and then being told that they're problematic, it gets them used to criminalization. You're like priming them. You're creating this mentality that they're dangerous or that they're no good. And we were talking about this before, folks who are planning the event, about young children who are handcuffed disproportionately, young Black children who are suspended at like lower than the age of 6. And so when you're taking kids who are in the education system because they're just going to school, or they're trying to improve their lives to some degree, and then you're making them feel like they're criminals. Do you know what I mean by criminals? That they're somehow not meant to be in that space. Then when they leave the space, it's not really a surprise what they end up doing. And I think that's why spaces like this are so important, because you're creating a home for folks so that we're actively working against spaces where they feel criminalized and moving them to spaces where they feel like they have a family and people to talk to and people like all of us here. So a support system.
Thank you. And just to be mindful of time, like even your thoughts, you can always put it in the chat so we can acknowledge you and we can actually read out the comments like near the end. So yeah, just want to be mindful of time. But like I really want to thank everyone for sharing this. As I mentioned before, it's a loaded question. One conversation, 100 conversations is not going to cover everything. We can only do it by layer, but please be like hopeful that don't continue to knock on the same door. There's so many doors that are open paths for everyone for the solutions. And yeah, and I guess I'll pass it on to the next question.
Thank you, Glows. And I'm just gonna put this in the chat, the next question, so folks can also follow along. And I'm going to invite Khalil. Khalil, are you ready, my friend?
I'm ready. Okay, perfect. Thank you all for those great feedback and just sharing. Definitely conversations like these are what we need in order to move to the right direction. I know some of us are feeling hopeless and thinking like, what's the point of actually having these conversations? And I think conversations like these is helping us to brainstorm strategies that we can put in place to actually help the people in our community that needs help. I don't think any word of voice or any workshop or program or advocacy actually goes unheard. I think all of it makes a difference. And when we look back to the people who came before us, the greats, right, that comes from all walks of life, they have created the future that we have now. And if they said, yo, what's the point? If they gave up, if they didn't try to, die or put their life on the line for us, where would we be? I wouldn't be in this country or in this position. So I'm so grateful for the people who fought the good fight of faith. And I think that's what we're doing here. We're fighting the good fight of faith. We're having faith that things will turn in our favor and things will actually work out. And I think if we never give up, right, we give the opportunity for those things to come into fruition. So the question today is nutrition, mental health, our overall health and well-being has an impact on access to education. What can we do to eliminate discrimination in the healthcare system to better support our youth? And I think in addressing this question, the first thing that we need to look at is the social determinant of health, right? So I just want to read a quick definition so we can all be level set and be on the same page. So the social determinant of health is are the conditions where people are born, where they grow, work, live, and their age. And those are the wider set of forces and systems shaping the conditions of our daily life. These forces and systems include economic policies, systems development agendas, social norms, social policies, and political systems. So one of the things that I noticed when doing this work, I had the phenomenal opportunity of working with young Black youth for 2 years, right? So I understand. Before I didn't, even though I was a Black youth and I grew up in the neighborhood that I grew up, there was a lot of things that I was blessed with that I didn't have to face compared to, the other Black youth that been racialized, coming from marginalized, impoverished neighborhoods, right? So the problem is that it's not that Black youth don't want to be successful, that they don't want to work hard, that they don't want to go to college, that they don't want to go to university. It has nothing to do with that. I heard Reagan speaking. She's like, oh, they're putting the blame on the Black youth. They're giving them all the onus. The problem is the system that is in place, right? A lot of the youth that come from the BIPOC community, they are disengaged, right? And there's tons of barriers. There's tons of challenges. There's tons of, traumas that they're dealing with that causes them to be distracted and not focused. So when I worked for C Center for Young Black Professionals, they were an organization that helped youth between ages 18 to 29 getting careers such as entertainment, hospitality, social community services, and trades, right? So they work with young people that were written off. So if they went to college and university and they dropped out, those are the youth that we work with. If they were in the criminal justice system, they were the youth that we work with. If they were having troubles, fighting, going through, fighting with their family, coming from toxic relationships, right? Coming from the hardest of hard neighborhoods, Jane and Finch Region Park. Listen, those were the youth that we actually wanted to work with. And was the work easy? No, it was tough and challenging. But one of the things that we did that was very exceptional is that we focused on their basic needs. So the approach that we had was doing things from a trauma-informed lens. And what that is, trauma-informed lens is understanding the role that trauma plays in an individual's life, right? When you have that lens, you're able to empathize. You're able to understand people, why they feel the way they feel and why they do the things that they do. So we did a risk and needs assessment. So we say, hey, let's partner up with people who go to schools, who are experts, right? So the social workers, the counselors, the psychotherapists, let's work with them. And also let's collaborate with outside agencies that had skills and strengths that we didn't have. And we said, let's do a basic needs assessment and let's create a work plan for them to help support them in the program. So when we were training them with we like to say hard skills, right? In the careers that they wanted to be, we also decided to give them the life skills, because it's one thing getting a career and getting a job, but there's another thing of actually keeping it and sustaining it. And what we noticed is that the mindset wasn't there. So we're like, hey, let's give you the life skills. So we trained them with the life skills, help them get that. Then we trained them with the hard skills, which is, them getting the expert knowledge and skills in the specific industry that they need, right? And after we were finished with the program, guess what happened with them? there was a 100% success rate with each and every one of them. And the reason why we say that is because they either went to college or university, they either went to another program, or they got a successful career in that job. So there was a success rate with them. And one of the things that we approached that I really love, and we had in this conversation, is that during every session, right? Every session that we had, guess what? They were fed. They had breakfast and they had lunch in every session of the program. And also they had transportation to get there, right? So we were nipping at all of the barriers that was actually stopping them from actually being successful in the program. And I think that's one of the issues and the problems that the schools doesn't do, is that they don't focus on that. And I also think about it is, why would young people go to school, carry 40,000 of debt so they can get loads of assignments and tough deadlines thrown at them? That makes no sense. Why would they ever do that? They rather say, hey, let me go out there and make money. The young people that we are working with today, they are focusing on surviving. That's the thing that I want to bring. They're not focusing on how can I do all of these great things. School is amazing and it's a wonderful opportunity. But if you live in the jungle where you're trying to survive, how you can get a job, put food on the table, your mom's struggling, she's working 2 and 3 jobs, she's barely home. You got to focus on your on government housing, this and that, and everything costs money. Guess what? Instead of me going to work for a company for $14 an hour, or instead of me going to school to incur 30,000 debt, guess what? I'm going to go on the streets and I'm going to make 2,000 a day, 1,000 a day from Jamal, right? And people think, oh, it's stupid. Obviously, when you look at the long terms of things, it makes no sense, right? It's a trap. It's only meant for you to fail, right? But when you look at the short term of things, when you're trying to survive, guess what? You're only thinking about the only thing that matters is the now. So this is what people don't understand. They're like, oh, why are they risking their whole future for just to make a little money? Because they're only focused for the now, right? And I like to take a look at Maslow hierarchy needs so we can understand what's important first before we can even get to those next steps, right? So psychological needs, those are air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, reproduction. If you don't have those things, there's no way you can feel safe. The next step is safety needs, where it's personal security, employment, right? Which is huge. So if you don't have your basic needs, don't even talk about employment, because that's not even something that I'm thinking about. Resources, health, property, right? After you do that, it's love and belonging. This is where friendships come, intimacy, family, sense of connection and belonging. This is why a lot of them are isolated and they're struggling in silence, right? Then we have esteem, respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, and freedom. And then you get to self-actualization when you become your best self. So you're not focused on getting education if you're not even having those basic simple needs met. You're focusing on just surviving. So that's the part one of what I want to answer, so we can understand that perspective before we even get people into the educational system. The next one is healthcare that we talk about. So the second part of the question. So there's so many different factors when it comes to the healthcare system, but one of it is intergenerational trauma. When we look back at studies, a lot of Black people were used as experiments, right? So there was a study that shows from Tuskegee, there was 100 Black male that they were testing on, and hundreds of them got syphilis. And one of the things that happened was they were denied treatment, right? So there's a big lack and a big distrust when it comes to us accessing, medical attention. And also there's so much systematic oppression. We're constantly discriminated. We're constantly, just looked as a number. We come in, yeah. What is this? They ask a few questions and they send us out. There's no relationship that's building. There's no report. There's no education that's coming around what we actually need, right? They're only using bandage approach. And also we have people that don't even look at us. The big topic, lack of representation. So if you don't have people who look like us, people don't come from lived experience, how do you think they're actually going to want to help us? It's not even possible. So I think there has to be training around that so they can take out the stigma that's behind us not getting the support that we need. And also removing all these medications that a lot of times we can't even afford. Look at natural and healthy remedies that has worked for us, right? And building that relation, building that rapport, so we can actually trust the doctors and nurses. And this is where we have to step up to the plate to say, yo, let me be a doctor, let me be a nurse, so I can actually help my people, so I can change up the culture that's there where it's saying, hey, I don't care about Black people, they actually don't matter. Right? Too many times our doctors are the old white male or the old white female. Why is that? We're smart enough, right? One of my mentors said, I'm going to end off with this because I know we have to go and go into the next question. If we can't beat or defeat a system, one of the things we have to do is to create a whole new system, right? So let's take the opportunity to create the system that we actually see. And the only way that we're going to do that is if you stop moving in silos, that we say, hey, all Blacks and all Indigenous people are all in one. We're all in the same. And we're going to figure out how can we collaborate and work together to create solutions for our community. So once again, I want to thank you for your time. And remember, change starts in the mind.
Well said, Khalil. Very passionate. Thank you so much for connecting the dots with the social determinants of health. When we talk about education, what we forget is that, a well-nourished mind, a well incubated and supported mind can't really grow, right? That learning, is lacking when those important factors are not in play. And we have a responsibility to look in the mirror and answer this question. Are we failing our kids? Are we failing Black, Indigenous, and students of color across Canada with a system that is not responsive to the basic needs of students? And you summed it up so well. So maybe we could, Khalid, do you wanna? We've got a couple of minutes. Do you want to just maybe quickly facilitate this question? See what other folks think. We've got a couple of minutes.
Perfect. Awesome. So I just want to hear from a few people, like, what are their thoughts? Is there anything that, I probably shared that resonated with you? If there's anything that you want to touch on when it comes to health, nutrition, mental health, when it comes to your community, has there been a personal experience that you have had previously when you went into the healthcare system where they probably, didn't give you the services or support that you need? But I really want to take this opportunity to hear from a few people. Feel free to write your question in chat or just, put up your hand or unmute your mic, whatever works best for you. I think Berlin has her hand up. You can go ahead.
Said that feels that it's lacking is, a setup for failure already. So anyhow you feel like you're lacking love or financial security or food security, then you're setting up, so before you even start, you feel like a failure. So how could we help people change, certain situation in their life so they could function at normal capacity?
100%. Thank you so much for sharing that. And one of the things I like that you said is the mindset. And the food that we eat actually determines how I feel, right? Our brain, our gut is actually our second brain. So if we're not actually feeding our gut, guess what? There's nothing that's going to go to our brain for us to function properly, because we're thinking about food. I can't think about, bed mass, or I can't think about geography. I can't think about any of those things because all I'm doing is thinking that I'm hungry. Judy has a contribution in the chat. So investigate alternate schools of the TDSB in which they feed the body and the mind at the same time by serving meals, breakfast, and lunch. The TDSB doesn't advertise these schools. 100%. I know for my school, we had a breakfast program that was affordable. It was like 25, 50 cents. But, the thing is with, I noticed with these programs is that, they get cut off so quickly, right? They last for 3 months, 6 months, a year. And then they say, oh, we didn't get the funding, so they stopped, right? Which is very unfortunate. It's like, hey, you give us something great. When something's working, we take it away. Why don't you sustain? Why don't you keep funding if you know it's actually helping our students, right? So definitely 100%. Once you feed the mind, you feed the body, you're able to, come whole. And you're able to focus on your learnings and the things that they're teaching you in school, which I think is super important and a great outlook to look at. And nutritional, right? Not just junk food, because we know how that affects people, right? Nutritional, having the fruits, having the veggies, having the water, food that's going to, really alert the mind and have people actually function properly.
Let's see, Philippe has his hand up.
Okay, Philippe, go ahead. Really looking forward to what you have to say.
Thanks. I was just thinking about something that you said, and oftentimes when folks need help, people, they're willing to help, don't ask what we actually need, but they assume what we need, especially in the healthcare system where, mental health. I can give an example of like my reality and my experiences. At school, they don't have anybody that speaks my language. I'm from Brazil, right? And there's just certain words that is hard to express in English. And as my second language, it was hard to find a therapist that could actually help me and support me on campus, right? And same goes for food. Like I grew up eating rice and beans. And for me, people are like, oh, we have cheap food on campus, you can buy it, but it's burgers. It's not what I want. It's not my nutrition. It's not like what's fitting for my reality. So oftentimes, whenever asking people what they need for help is a lot better than, just providing something. And the structures and the systems we have in place in our institutions and stuff is really upsetting that they don't face our realities because they can't really know. And then they use their resources to, help us on the best way possible, but that is not the best way possible for me or for you or for whatever, So it's just like, I feel like people forget to ask, what do you need in order to succeed? And they forget that meaning of equity, which is really shameful because, you're not really helping anyone, you know what I mean? So I like what you said about that. I thought that was really interesting.
That's powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's huge, right? I like whenever going to work, I never say, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to provide this solution. No, I'm going to ask you exactly what you need so I can provide you the supports that's going to work best for you. So we have a couple hands up. Shanna and Charlene. I'm not too sure who had their hand up first, but you can go ahead.
Charlene.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Khalil. I just want to speak about the nutrition programs that they offer in elementary school. Some schools have them, some schools don't. I did not realize that as a parent. And that's something that I believe in asking superintendents, trustees, and potential politicians when they come to your door about, because I believe that all children in Ontario should have access to a breakfast program. Number one, we don't know what's happening at home unless they divulge to us. And number two, it will make things easier for parents who are on the go. So I'm a parent who works at 6:18 in the morning. I'm not there in the morning. So if there is a breakfast program at the school my children attend, that would be an ease or a burden off of myself or the caregiver for those days. A lot of parents I've talked to in different areas, Peel and York, their school has a program that they can buy a lunch a few days a week, and it's at a cost, like a lower cost than if they're the cafeteria style in high school. So that's, again, another eases the burden at that home, and it's at a low cost. And then the school councils fundraise to raise money to make sure that all the children have access to that meal on be it Tuesday and Thursday. So those are also things that I ask politicians about when they knock on your door. I'm like, okay, yes, this is what you're saying, but what about this as far as education is concerned? And we have to keep doing that. I know it feels sometimes like we're fighting a battle that's never going to be won, but if we don't continue fighting the battle, we're not even going to make one step forward. So as people who employ politicians, we need to hold them accountable for all the things that we want done, all the action items that we come up with. We need to hold our politicians accountable for that, be it the person you voted for or not. I'm quick to email somebody, make a phone call, because change has to happen. And it comes from us, because we are the population. We are those who are dealing with the system, be it as students, as parents, as educators. We're dealing with that, with the system. And we have to hold that politician accountable. And as there's an election a few days away, I would love to be in the ear of Stephen Lecce right now. I wish he was in my riding, because there's so many changes that need to come, and he was the education minister. So there's so many changes that need to happen. But if we don't speak up about it, change will never come, as we all know. Thank you, everyone.
Beautiful, well said. Right, think about it. The things that are normal to us is not normal for other people. It was a young person who I work with, and his parents was neglecting him of actually eating. So denying him food every time. So he wasn't eating. So the fact that we can have a breakfast program, that means young people have the opportunity to grab something to eat. And like you said, parents are busy. They may not have the time. They may be working 2-3 jobs. This is actually, taking off the burden off of them. Right. And sometimes when I see the young people, they're just eating the food like there's no tomorrow. Right. So I think programs like this are super important. They're helping so many individuals. I'm going to pass off to Shana to share her thoughts.
Another thing with healthcare, when you go to the hospital, like my daughter went to the hospital with my grandson, and instead of, he was supposed to get a one-shot medication thing, the nurse gave it to him, but the doctor didn't know that the nurse gave it to him and prescribed the next one shot. It was already given to him. The doctors need to communicate with the nurses. If there's a one shot being done, why are you overdosing people? Like, are you trying to kill people when they came to you for help? That's wrong. They need to communicate and stop making stupidest mistakes. Like simple, small little mistakes that they could have communicated. They're making a huge mistake and could get rid of somebody's life. A baby who's 1 year old, come on. That's wrong. What? Because we're Black or because we're what? They need to do better in the health system. It's really messed up.
And examples and stories like those is what brings fears to our whole community. So many of us are scared to go to the doctor. Like, it'll just be a checkup. They're saying not, because they hear so many stories where, they give us the wrong medicine, they give us the wrong injection, they're doing this, and, you think you're going there to fix something, you come out with another problem, right? So it's very unfortunate, those are the things, but that's why we need people like us who actually care, right? And I know, in that industry and the field, a lot of them are burnt out, working long hours. So those tiny areas of mistakes, they're going to happen, right? So thank you for sharing. And then I think we're going to move on to the next question due to time. So I'm going to pass it off to, who's the last person? Is it Metro or Reagan?
It's me.
Reagan?
Reagan. Okay, so that's the fourth question. And I'm just going to share them on the screen. And thank you, Khalil, for that wisdom, right? And actually connecting the dots. Really, really appreciated, my friend. So I'm just going to quickly share a last question on the screen. Reagan, go ahead.
Sure. So we wanted to end off with this open-ended question. Felipe touched on why earlier, saying that it's better for us to ask what folks need as opposed to just assuming. So the question is, how could we make post-secondary more welcoming and accessible to BIPOC students? And so I can get us started, and then we definitely want to hear from folks. Okay, here's my thing. Students need grants, not loans. I'll go to the grave saying that. We were talking earlier about how education is an investment. It's not a cost. And it's interesting how colonizers come here and set up shop and create an economic system. And then they charge you to have a degree or a diploma or a certificate to then be competitive in that economic system. It's not okay. It puts BIPOC students at a disadvantage because they're having to think about cost as opposed to passion when they're going to post-secondary. So that's what I think, but we definitely want to ask you folks how post-secondary can be more welcoming and accessible to all of you and the BIPOC folks that you know. Mitra.
Thank you, Reagan. I think for me, making like education more accessible for me and my communities is by making education free. We know that free education is a possibility because budgets are all about priorities. So we need to make sure that we're prioritizing students. And like you said, Reagan, students are an investment. We are the future. The youth make up the largest voting bloc. And that's why it's important, like Charlene said, to go out and vote and make sure, there's folks that are going to prioritize education in every single way possible. Beyond free and accessible education, I'm also thinking about the fact that students are intersectional. We have multiple different lived experiences. Students are workers, students are renters. So how do we make sure that we're addressing the housing crisis? How do we make sure that we're addressing the housing crisis that impacts students, but like folks across the province generally, thinking about students that are food insecure on and off our campuses. I know at my time in my university, like we had a food bank and I was forever thankful for it because as time went on, there was more and more students making use of it. And I was grateful that it was there. But that increase in use of the food bank ultimately meant that there were more students on our campuses that were food insecure. Where does that come from? Well, there's different reasons that happens, but a big portion of it is the tuition fee. So how do we make our spaces more welcoming and accessible to BIPOC communities? I'm ultimately thinking about eliminating tuition fees so folks can think about accessing post-secondary education. Someone like me wouldn't have been able to access education if it wasn't for loans and grants and OSAP and things like that. But then now I'm left with thousands and thousands of dollars in debt that I have to pay for once I'm graduated. And I pinky promise you, no matter how hard I work, it's difficult because I worked all throughout university, but I haven't been able to pay off my loans incomplete. And like, how long is that going to take me? And how is that going to hold me back from contributing, in the economy in the ways that I'm supposed to? Can I even imagine buying a house right now? No. Can I imagine buying a car and things like that? So really thinking about the fact that students are the future, and that's why we need to invest in education. And that increasing access is ultimately going to increase the skills that we also have available within our greater society. Well, thank you. I think those are my immediate thoughts.
Yeah, that was awesome. I'll open the floor to everyone else. How can post-secondary education institutions be more accessible and welcoming to all of you? Okay, Shauna, you want to share?
Yeah, what you just said is true. We need tuition-free courses. We need loan forgiveness if it's especially been too long and we're having a hard time and we try to pay it off and we're still having such a hard time paying it off. Whatever happened to loan forgiveness? We need that. Thank you.
Definitely. I think all the students in this space can attest to wanting loan forgiveness for sure. Okay, Charlene in the chat is saying we need to reimagine what education can be if access to free post-secondary education became a reality. Absolutely. It's not just about making it free and free, but also accessible. And Judy says, unfortunately, the onus is on the student to investigate and find the grants and bursaries that they qualify for. They're definitely hidden under a bunch of layers. And Waleed.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that very important, feedback with regards to like eliminating tuition, which are user fees for access to, in my opinion, a public service, right? When we think about elementary education, we think about high school, we don't put user fees to it, right? So why do we do that for post-secondary education? And also when we're thinking about the impact of debt, there's other ways where folks, have to basically address sources of debt, when it comes to housing, when it comes to other basic needs, right? So, looking at ancillary fees as well, are residences accessible, for students who don't have access to to funds or support that will help them pay through the education. I always think about needs for students who become parents, right? When we think about childcare, there's all these other invisible barriers that exist. I recall when I was elected as president of the Students Union, one of the biggest campaigns I ran was to put forward a childcare facility on campus, just because so many parents, so many women of color were complaining to me that they were not able to continue their post-secondary education studies because there wasn't those facilities were not available on campus, right? So those are things that we need to also like challenge as other costs apart beyond tuition, that need to be addressed so that we can eliminate barriers. And I also think like, why aren't students being paid to go to school? Why aren't they being compensated for how they're going to be giving back to society? They're building skills, they're building experiences. Why are we forcing them to pay? Like, when I think of the investments that are made to make sure that members of our community have access to careers and opportunities, is because governments and policymakers expect that they will be paying back to the pot, and they do so in so many ways. So why isn't that also part of the equation of the conversation as to how can we compensate students? How can we make sure that our student unions are well funded so they're able to offer amazing services and programs like the free breakfast club. I remember that back at UTM used to get funded by the Students Union and then became something that the Students Union took on and funded and supported. And that's an important service. Wouldn't it be amazing if students could go to the administrators and the student union representatives and actually get support, right? And help. And I know that's the primary responsibility of student unions, but imagine if administrators also had that responsibility. Instead of students going there because they have to deal with their debt and interest payments, and the lack of adequate mental health supports, especially culturally appropriate mental health supports, right? So there's all these challenges that students have been asked to take on by themselves, through their student unions, which is the only advocacy organizations they have, right? So how could the broader community support youth? We talk about voting, we talk about making noise to our elected representatives, but how could we be co-collaborators, co-conspirators to ensure that our collective dream to eliminate those fees for students and direct investments for students becomes a reality? So I just wanted to share those thoughts.
Awesome. Thanks, Waleed. I would agree. And I'm gonna acknowledge what folks are writing in the chat about, oh yes, applying for grants and scholarships is like having a workload of an entire other class. Absolutely. And it's true about the question that's often asked when you're applying to a scholarship or grant is, what's your situation? And the people on the other end are really looking for a sob story. And folks know that. So when they're writing, they can't really withhold information that they would want to withhold. Definitely agree. All right. Thanks, folks, for answering all the questions. I think I'll pass it back to the next speaker and we can continue.
Yep, I think we've got. I think we've finished all our questions. So we might take questions from the audience in case there's any. We've got about a couple of minutes left, but I just want to acknowledge a lot of comments in the chat. Judy says, absolutely agree. Why do I have to share my pain in order to access funding that I don't have to pay back? Applying for grants and scholarships like having a workload. Yeah, it's like another job for certain students, right? So many invisible barriers for many students that are Black, Indigenous, and students of color. So thanks so much. There's so much amazing comments in the chat. And what I think we're going to do next is we'll see if there's any other questions. And if not, we'll do some. Oh, go ahead, Shana.
And another thing, Walid, in our neighborhood especially, the newcomers, they like, or all parents. I mean, I advise all parents to stop telling their children to not play with other culture children. Like, you know, there's even Canadian, I mean, families that are feeling like they're being their kids, like there's newcomers that are telling their like kids, do not play with another child. That's wrong.
It's horrible.
Whatever culture you're from, you know, whatever race you are, for you to tell a child not to play with another child just because they're not the same culture, the same, you know, color, whatever, like, that's so wrong. We need to, like, they need to stop. The newcomers need to be educated about these things. That you know, families who have been here for many years do not have to put up with those things. You know, they feel like it's not fair for them to feel like, you know, they need to run away from the neighborhood just because the new families are doing that to their children.
Yeah, well said. Well said, Shana. Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any other comments or any questions that they'd like to pose?
Walid, I wanted to share that when I think post-secondary, I'm thinking, what about, you know, some people, they may not budget properly for certain items that they need. When they run out of money, where do they go? There's no, you know, sometimes there's not much funding or any funding at all to help them continue with certain areas of their life to buy certain things that they need. So what happens? You know, there should be some type of maybe resources or a program or there that, you know, they could turn to if they need that extra help with funding.
I'm going to actually pose a question to everyone, and then we'll take Judy next. Do you think we all stop learning after university or after formal education? Does anyone think that? I'm just looking at people's reactions. Does anyone think that? People are saying no in the chat. No, wait, those are facts, right? And so why is education and debt? Why is there a connection between education and debt? And why are Black, Indigenous, and other students of color deeply impacted by such policies, right? We need to like challenge that. That is, in my opinion, racist policies. You're putting user fees for access to public education because and you know who it's going to impact the most. So it's racist. But that's my personal opinion. And I think it's substantiated by a lot of data. Judy, go ahead.
My biggest beef when I was going to university is they would deliberately switch around the chapters in the textbook. So they'll say you need this edition this year for your class. Like Introduction to Psychology 101, you need this edition. So you go on to psychology the next year. And they change a few chapters, same author, change a few chapters, switch them around. So now I have to buy a new textbook. and it says the same thing. It's just that chapter 2 is now chapter 4, right? And vice versa. So now I have to buy a new book because they won't accept me taking the old one. And then they say, the bookstore tells you, oh yeah, sure, you can resell your book. But the professor, I think the whole entire system is in cahoots because no. You have to have this version. We're not using that version anymore. What difference does it make when you actually go through the textbooks? It's the same damn thing. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just the chapters are switched.
So there's a profit incentive to sell books, and even if the knowledge is the same, republish it, remarket it, and repackage it so that people pay for it. So instead of edition 2, it's now edition 3, and instead of edition 3, it's edition 29, right? And keeps going and going and going. And you're right, great observation. And that's some cost passed on to indebted students, right? which is so unfortunate.
The majority of my wasted tuition, my wasted OSAP money was textbooks that I couldn't resell because they were even though they tell you at the bookstore you can, right? It's the wasted books of I can't resell it. No one wants it because it's no longer the version they're using.
Yeah. A lot of students have fallen into that trap, that's for sure. Well said. So I'm going to quickly share the screen and just share some resources. And just want to, first of all, acknowledge our amazing facilitators, Reagan, Mitra, Khalil, Close. You folks were amazing. And we just finished our question piece. And I just wanted us to quickly focus about how we could take action after this workshop. So there's various organizations and groups that are fighting the good fight to make sure that our education system is truly accessible, to make sure that we don't have user fees for public education, such as tuition, that we have resources for our parents as well as our educators. So before I jump into the other resources, I just want to encourage you folks to visit the resources that we shared last week. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, the Coalition Against White Supremacy and Islamophobia, the National Council of Canadian Muslims, the Filipino Youth Fellowship. There's some amazing links to resources that you could use. And I also want to acknowledge the resources of our panelists that spoke last week. Sister Miss Quason, Miranda Black, Debbie King, Deborah, who joined us today. Welcome, Deborah. Thank you so much for sharing some of these resources. Ontario Education Workers United, Parents of Black Children, that's a website. The Gord Downey and Wenjack Fund, and that's their website. So check out those resources. We also want to thank our partners. This was not possible without your support, specifically Toronto QP, Local 4400, which represent Toronto's education workers, and the Canadian Federation of Students Ontario, that represent hundreds of thousands of students across the province of Ontario. Thank you for your support. We want to encourage you to start a neighborhood pod, but also connect with us. We want you to be connected to your neighbors so that you can continue to support each other through this grassroots network of pods and supports. So here's how you can contact us on Facebook. On Twitter, we're at PodsTO. On IG, it's Neighborhood PodsTO, and we have a website. We're also available on Discord for you to connect with us. So I just want to say thank you for making this workshop a success. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And I just want to say thank you once again for making this event a success because of your contributions, your questions, your comments. I want to give a shout out to our amazing organizing team that included our amazing facilitators, but also the folks that are working behind the scenes. So Berian, thank you so much. Want to acknowledge Charlene, who's been co-moderating, co-facilitating this amazing discussion. Thank you so much. I also want to acknowledge who is with us here. Alicia is not with us today.
Karen is here.
Sorry?
Karen.
Where's Karen? There she is. Karen is here. Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much for all the support you've offered us and all the support you continue to offer us after this event. And also the amazing facilitators. Thank you, Khalil. Thank you, Mitra. Thank you, Reagan. Thank you, Glows. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for making space today. So I'm just gonna stop recording, and what we'll do is we'll just check in after this. Give me 1 second. And give me 1 more.